Up until the recession, we were perking along in an organic growth mode that was successful for us.
The mortgage business was red hot. The housing business was red hot. The economy was booming right along pretty smartly. And then it all just came to a grinding halt.
The United States went through a financial earthquake. And I think at that time we very much questioned what our future would be.
There was a rising level of concern as to what the impact would be on the bank and on the community, because the nature of our banking system here for Mascoma in the Upper Valley is that we rely on businesses being viable. We rely on people having jobs so that they can take out loans and pay mortgages.
We had a number of customers who were impacted negatively, and they were impacted because of loss of job stability. Didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know if they were going to have their jobs tomorrow. They lost income. The income was either gone because the jobs were gone, or their hours were cut, so they lost their income that way. A lot of our customers lost value in their homes. Property values were down. Equity was down. So a lot of the things that folks have taken for granted all those years were not there. And for many people, it was overnight.
2009, 2010, even some part of 2011, there was a flight to safety. And there were people moving money out of what they perceived now to be risky investments and moving it into the banking system, where at least it was insured and they felt there was a reasonable chance that they would get at least their money back. Maybe, they wouldn't see a lot of growth, but at least they wouldn't lose principal. As the financial problems began to unfold, a lot of the larger banks, particularly in our area, regional banks, had to kind of pull their horns in. They were being stressed. Their capital was being stressed, and one of the fastest ways to improve your capital is to shrink your asset base. So a lot of them pulled their horns in. They went to certain of their customers and they said, we want you to find another banking relationship because we're not going to be lending in the industry that you're in.
We had capital, we were healthy, we had good credit quality, and we stepped into that void. And we found all of a sudden that we had opportunity at much larger commercial real estate lending deals than we traditionally had seen.
Because although the economy is slowed, it's not in a disaster scenario by any means. And as long as we're careful in our underwriting and as long as we make loans that make sense, we could do quite well.
In a small rural environment like Vermont and New Hampshire, you get a reputation very quickly if you learn how to do and structure a deal and you have an appetite, and very soon lots of deal flow comes to you because the gatekeepers learn that, gee, Mascoma is a great place to do business.
In 2009 and 2010, at the height of the crisis, if you will, with the politicians and the news media screaming day after day after day that the banks weren't lending, we made, in those 2 years, we made $800 million of loans. Now the bank at that time wasn't even $1 billion in size, and we made $800 million of loans.
From our point of view as a smaller community bank, it felt and still feels as if the federal government has attempted to impose upon community banks solutions that were meant to deal with larger banks, and that they don't serve the purpose the federal government really is seeking to achieve, and instead is making it more difficult for community banks to operate.
The law itself, with all of the addendums, was around 2,100 pages. They're about maybe 60% of the way through in terms of writing the regulations that will emanate out of Dodd-Frank, and I think we have something in excess of 12,000 pages of regulations that we have to deal with. And we've got to go through them, we've got to read them, we've got to understand them to understand how they impact us.
A lot of the regulation does nothing for the customer except, drive up costs and add inconvenience and probably shut some of them out of the market or just make it more difficult for them to get credit.
And frankly, I think that it makes us a lot less user-friendly. When somebody comes in here to open an account today, we practically strip search them. And we don't draw blood yet, but that day doesn't seem to me to be far away. It's ridiculous, but again, the federal government requires that we know our customers and that we positively identify everyone that we're doing business with.
If I look back over the changes in technology over the last 10 years, they're probably some of the most significant changes in my banking career. We think back about the time when we had typewriters and we had reams of reports and we had loan files and we had courier schedules to juggle and we had to get the documents to the attorneys ahead of time for the closing. We just think of how paper-driven we were and how we utilized technology, but we were really paper-driven.
All of the work that we get now from the Federal Reserve comes into us as check images, and the branches are actually doing something called branch capture, which means that the retail staff actually scan their work and it gets transmitted to us over our comm lines.
So when it's time to close up their drawers at the end of the day, instead of sending us all those paper documents by courier, they transmit those documents to us electronically over our network.
We had 2 rooms that we built upstairs. One was for check processing. That room now is completely devoid of any check processing equipment, and that was the sole purpose that we constructed it for. It's now filled with servers.
I would have never envisioned 10 years ago that our file room, which we worked so hard to get up and running when we moved here, we actually had to reinforce the floor. We got all the new stacks and the thousands of files that we put in there. I would have never imagined that 10 years later, those stacks are pretty much empty and all of our files are electronic.
We used to send out packets of information before every board meeting, every committee meeting, and now they use iPads. The senior leadership team does as well. We try to eliminate carrying as much paper around as possible.
Technology has just opened up a world of opportunities for us to be able to interact with our customers and so many different choices. So I think it's really just broadened what we can do for our customers and the choices that they can have for banking with Mascoma.
The younger generation wants to do things electronically, and if you're not offering people's ability to make check deposits with their phone, you may not be a valid player in a couple of years with those people.
We'll still have customers who will want the branches, who will want that personal contact, but I see more and more of what we do going toward the technology side of the house, electronic banking, even more than what it is today.
In 10 years from now, where do you think you're going to be?
Retired.
We got to balance spending money on technology versus buildings and infrastructure and people who still want to come to the bank to do those things. Anytime there's a renovation project or an upkeep needed at a branch, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, well, how long do people want to come into this building to do banking before they start doing it electronically?
Well, first when we acquired the Heartland branch back in 1996, the one thing that stood out in my mind, it was a white building, and on the end of it, it said bank. That's all it said.
I'm told that part of that building, when it was originally constructed, actually was the framework of somebody's barn that they moved on site to start kind of the framework of the building. But the building had lots of issues right from the start. It was on 2 levels, so the main banking platform and the teller in the drive-up area actually had 2 levels, which is really kind of unusual. You had to step down into the drive-up area.
So we looked at several locations in the Heartland area, trying to stay close to the 3 corners. And for one reason or another, they just didn't work out. Either we couldn't acquire the land, or it wasn't laid out properly, or it was going to be too expensive to take something down and rebuild. So we decided to expand on the existing footprint, utilizing every inch of our space provided to us.
As hard it was to come to the conclusion, we decided it was time to tear the building completely down and start over from scratch.
One, two, three. Welcome.
Mine doesn't, so I've got them. Did you want me to fill out your book for you?
It hadn't been seriously renovated since 1985 or 6. And at 5 o'clock on Friday, as soon as we closed the doors, I still remember watching this. This guy climbed in a little Bobcat, which is a little motorized construction vehicle with a bucket on the front. He drove right through the front doors. I mean, they opened up wide enough. He drove through the front doors, and the first thing he did was to pull the ceiling down, because we replaced the entire ceiling in there.
In the vestibule, we found underneath all the flooring, it's a octagon, and it had the Mascoma Savings Bank in the year 1899 in a trezzo, and we wanted to preserve that.
They had built the teller line off-site, the actual physical site, but basically had the branch back up and operating Tuesday morning when we came to work.
The main source of income for traditional banks such as Mascoma has been eroding. From a practical standpoint, the reason that we had been looking at an insurance agency was that we are trying to diversify our streams of income.
You know, it's not banking. It's a very different business. It's very sales oriented, but it's a financial service that, you know, almost all of your customers have a need for insurance.
The fall of 2012, we began finding space and hiring folks, and in the beginning of 2013, we began offering new insurance policies to new customers.
You know, it's now a fully functioning traditional agency on the corner in Lebanon, kind of as you would envision. But you know, we've got a staff of 5 folks, and they're very busy.
We already have a relationship with tens of thousands of households within our market area, and being able to provide an insurance alternative to them is a logical extension of what we're doing.
Our economy is changing, the customers' demands are changing, and those businesses, whether they be in insurance or banking or any type of business that sits there and says, I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, is probably not going to be around in the future. And so you do have to look forward.
Have you ever given any thought to being in the investment management business? There's a lot of growth in that business here in the Upper Valley. There's a tremendous need for it, and your name and reputation is stellar.
The first question the board raised really was, are we going to do this in a way that benefits our customers and allows them to do some financial planning that they might not otherwise be able to do?
We were ceding the business to competitors, so this fills a big gap, and I think places us now on the map.
These are all financial services, but I think the awareness that they're now available at Mascoma is still rather limited, and I think that's our key hurdle and our key challenge over the next couple of years, is to build awareness that Mascoma is a financial services firm and not just a bank.
Once the senior management of Mascoma realized what had happened up here and the extent of it, they just so rallied. It was what we are.
It was an overwhelming thing to think of how to restore all the public infrastructure that had been damaged. And I would credit Mascoma Savings Bank with an enormous debt of gratitude here that we owe them. The funds were made available to us to enable us to buy supplies, hire contractors, pay contract obligations without any qualifications or reservations. What we had need of, they stood behind us and provided.
Instead of getting in the way, which banks have an ability to do, creating so much red tape that they found excuses not to help, which bigger banks wanted to do, they came in and they said, listen, how do we help? They went into communities and said, how can we help municipalities get the resources they need, the cash right now to help rebuild? How do we get to our customers and individuals who got hit so hard, the business capital they need right now, not tomorrow, but now?
I was sitting in my office one day minding my own business and the phone rang, and it was an investment banker. He called to say if we would be interested in taking a look at a bank that was somewhat contiguous.
Then we found out it was Connecticut River Bank, and so we said to ourselves, is that something we want to pursue?
The geography of this transaction makes a lot of sense, and the way the balance sheets match up makes a lot of sense. And the kind of bank that they are and the kind of bank that we are, I think the cultures, I don't think there'll be any cultural clashes as we put things together. Connecticut River kind of views the world the way we do.
They're much older than we are. I mean, we think we're old, being established in 1899, but I think their charter goes back to 1826 or 28, so they're 60 or 70 years older than we are. So they've been in the community banking business for a lot longer than we have.
A community bank like that would want to have another community bank that has kind of the similar values and relationship with the communities that it serves, being the successor organization.
Their tradition of community banking stays in place, in that they're not bought by someone from Massachusetts or Connecticut or New York.
You can't slow down. I mean, it's the nature of the business. You know, the business is different right now at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon than it was when we came into work this morning. So it's you can't slow down. You got to keep moving.
We can do different things more efficiently. We can do more things. But as far as how we feel and how we treat our customers and what the bank's purpose and values are, that doesn't change.
I think a lot of what we get in the way of new customers is the word of mouth that this is a good bank. And it's a good bank not because they manage themselves and your money well, but because they care.
One of my coworkers who was new to Mascoma had worked in the banking industry for quite some time said, you know, everybody talks the talk, but Mascoma walks the walk, and that really, you find that to be true. You know, we talk about putting our customers first, we talk about serving our community, and we back that up with the actions, and that's a culture that's ingrained here, and it's a great culture to join.